Hi, Mike here. You're watching Scout Restoration Yukon. In this video, I will describe how I cleaned and relined the fuel tanks. Then I will install them in the Scout. This is not a how-to video. It's a how I do video. I hope you like it. Let's get to work. If you want to help, please subscribe to Scout Restoration Yukon. It's free. Mike Morrow, over and out. These are the fuel tanks for the Scout 800. Last year, when I removed them from the Scout, I looked inside with a flashlight, and they weren't too bad. There was a little bit of stuff in there, a little bit of rust, but nothing serious. And the only place there was actually any rust was just at the curve on the front at the bottom of the tank. There was a little bit of surface rust. So what I did was I made a mixture of water and muriatic acid, a mild mix, and poured it in each tank. And then I put the pieces of chain, bolts, big nuts and bolts, stuff like that in the tanks. And I shook them and rolled them around and moved them and dumped them out. And I did this several times until the solution came out perfectly clean. This is what it looked like inside the two Scout fuel tanks after rinsing and thoroughly drying them. And then I coated them inside with a product called Red Coat, which is effectively a tank liner. You pour it in there, you roll it around so it covers every surface, and you let it dry. So basically, these tanks have been relined, and they're not going to give any problems. This is the Red Coat tank liner. You can see inside the tank how it has filled every nook and cranny, relining the entire tank. So since I broke the stud with a screwdriver, I pried up these tabs. This is the contact. This contact moves along this variable resistor. Let's see what the problem is. The variable resistor, which goes from 0 to 90 ohms, is broken. So it's no longer connected to the stud. So this thing is junk. Hi, Mike here. You're watching Yukon Scout Restoration. I'm ready to install the passenger side fuel tank. In order to have enough room to get the tank in, you have to remove the rear wheel and raise the vehicle so the axle is hanging. So let's get to work. You can see the fuel line on the bottom of the tank. The tank sits in the Scout like this. The fuel line goes from the top of the tank underneath and out through a hole in the fuel tank compartment. At the end of the fuel tank compartment, you can see here the hole the fuel line has to go through. And you can also see I've run a wire for the gauge to the sender unit on the tank. So now I want to put the tank in. The trick is going to be to get the tank in there and to get the fuel line to go in that hole. So here goes. Now the tank's going in, but of course I cannot see the fuel line. Just pull it out a little for a bit here. Have a look. Okay. Got it. Wasn't too bad. What I did was I reached in there with this tool and hooked the fuel line and steered it towards the hole. So that's in place. Now I just have to put the 4 mounting bolts on the bottom of the tank. I am applying a little bit of Never Cease to the fuel tank mounting bolts. Just a little bit, just enough that it doesn't go all over the place. I'm just doing the final tightening on these bolts. They don't have to be super tight. They're just 5/16 bolts. So just tighten them up. Right. You can see the fuel line protruding out of the fuel tank compartment. From here, it goes across the truck, over the transmission hump, and on the other side of the truck, it connects to the fuel valve, fuel selector valve. I'll be making that fuel line. It's quite rusty. I'm now going to install the fuel tank on the driver's side. Let's get to work. You can see I've installed the wire for the fuel sender for this tank also. So here goes one more time. I have it. It came through. Not exactly easy, but not so hard either. So now all I have to do is line up the holes and start the 4 bolts. Tank has to come out a little bit. Now, there's a bolt hole there. So, Never Cease, of course, on the bolt. That's why I'm getting them one by one. You absolutely have to use the right bolts for this. These are very short bolts. If the bolt's too long, it will go right through the hole and into the tank. We don't want that. Let's see what's going on with these now. Okay. They're not tight yet. I'm going to get a ratchet and tighten them up. Let's have a look at the tank. And the drain plug is centered. I don't know if you can see the drain plug. Let's tighten these bolts up. That's pretty tight for 5/16 bolts. Here's a better look at the drain plug. One on each side. If you look at the fuel line, it's going through a hole in the sheet metal with no grommet. So what I'm going to do is get a piece of rubber hose and slide it over that fuel line so it's not touching metal. What I'm doing is I have a piece of 3/8 fuel line that I've cut a slit in it, and I want to slide it over this fuel line. Quite the same idea as a grommet. It doesn't have a grommet. It never had a grommet. So I should be able to slide this over there, get it to go through the hole. Flare nut. Can't go with it. There's the flare nut. Right. So now I have this nice grommet in place. What I'm going to do
Put a small hose clamp on it to secure it. And I got the crack down so any moisture doesn't stay in the hose, right? The split is down. Now, we're in good shape to tighten that up now. There. So now we have a very well protected fuel line. So I'm doing the same thing on the other side. Get another piece of hose and push it through the hole. There. Cool. So that's well in place. I'll just slip a clamp on there. There we go. That's not going anywhere. Note that I've installed the fuel tank selector valve in the Scout and marked the left and right tank selections.
Then I installed the flare nuts, flared the line, both ends, and painted it so it won't rot.
Now I'm connecting the valve to the left-hand tank. I will finish tightening these with the flare nut wrench.
I will now install the crossover line from the selector valve to the right-hand tank.
Getting this fuel line into position is pretty tricky. Through here.
If the transmission was installed, I wouldn't be able to get this line in. I would have to make a flexible fuel line.
Doing the final tightening here using a flare nut wrench. A 9/16 wrench to hold the block. And the other line. Pull this out a bit. Get that on there. Now I'm putting a self-tapping screw in here. There. So, this line is solid. It doesn't move. The fuel line, it can't vibrate. The brake line is solid. It doesn't move. It can't vibrate. The fuel line and the brake line do not touch each other in any way. They're independent. It's extra work, but that's the way to do it. If you don't want to have problems, we won't have any problems with that. It's good to go. In conclusion,
The crossover line is connected to the fuel tank and bolted to the body of the Scout.
it's attached with a clip at the top of the transmission hump. And on the other side, it's also bolted with another clip so it can't vibrate or move. Also note, where the fuel line passes over the brake line, they're both secured and they cannot touch each other. Finally note that all connections have been made to the fuel selector valve and everything looks good.
In conclusion, clean fuel tanks are very important. I want clean fuel for my rebuilt fuel pump and carburetor. In my next video, Fuel Tanks 2, I will install the new fuel level senders and filler necks. I hope you like it. If you want to help, please subscribe to Scout Restoration Yukon. It's free. Mike Morrow, over and out.